There you go.
All right, let's talk about our conference championships. The stage is set. We are ready to go. Next week, our first game will be on Sunday at 3. That will be the number 3 seed Chiefs heading to Baltimore to face the number 1 seed Ravens. That's Sunday at 3, and Baltimore opens as 3.5-point favorites.
Yeah. This is Lamar Jackson's first AFC Championship appearance. I think you said earlier this is Baltimore's first time hosting the AFC Championship. We're going to get more Jason Kelce and Taylor Swift in Baltimore, so not nearly as far of a drive for Jason. I'm sure he's thrilled about that. Maybe the kids will come and meet Taylor. Who knows? But a couple things that I had found before this. And actually, I want to read this out in its mostly in its entirety. This was something I got from John Breach from CBS Sports. This pertains to all of the conference championship. So teams that play on Saturday, which means that they get one extra day of rest, have gone 19-9 in the conference title round over the past 13 years. Both that applies for both the Niners and the Ravens. To add to that, at least one team that played on Saturday in the divisional round has won at least one of the conference title games in 17 of the past 19 years, which means it's highly unlikely that both the Lions and Chiefs win. The one-day advantage doesn't sound like much, but you can think of it like this. While the Chiefs were busy fighting for their lives in a one-score win over the Bills on Sunday night, the Ravens were sitting around tweeting out shirtless locker room pictures. And to add to that, in 8 of the past 10 years, the home team has won the NFC Championship game. And in a perfect coincidence, the home team has also won 8 of the past 10 conference title games in the AFC. So a lot of the numbers point to the Niners and the Ravens having a lot of advantages going into this game.
Yes, it does. Do you want to read? I'll read some of the stats you gave us here.
Yeah.
The Ravens gave up the fewest points this year on defense, which was only 16.5 per game, and led the league in sacks with 60. Chiefs were second in both of those categories, but Mahomes has been sacked 0 times this postseason. He's 1-3 this season when sacked 3 or more times. And since the start of the playoffs, the Chiefs offense has averaged more yards and points than they did during the regular season. So yeah, it's going to be the best defense that Mahomes has. The Ravens defense is going to be the best defense that Mahomes has faced this season. And it seems like genuinely getting pressure on Mahomes seems to have a lot of, will work well for the Ravens if possible. I mean, it worked for the Ravens team against the Texans. It was a really effective way to slow down the Texans offense. And I think it will be very helpful. But you're going to have to, I think you're going to have to do something a little bit more, and you're going to have to try and contain Mahomes because he's been using his legs more in these later weeks. So this Ravens defense is going to have to adapt to containing him as well.
It's the Chiefs have taken it to a new level in the playoffs so far this postseason. They've just been better on all accounts on offense. They've looked more cohesive. Maybe that is because Kadarius Toney has not been playing. That's very possible. The second half of the year emergence of Rashee Rice is definitely part of that, along with Travis Kelce looking more like his old self on offense. He's averaging over 70 yards per game in the playoffs, and in the last, I think, 3 weeks, he was averaging closer to like 30 or 40, as well as averaging 2 touchdowns per game in the playoffs. He's been awesome, and when he's awesome, that only makes Mahomes' life easier. The offense has been humming, and the defense continued exactly what they were doing in the regular season. And that's going to pair up really well against a Ravens offense that has been operating on all cylinders all season, as we've talked about, and the number 1 defense in the NFL for sure. They're deep on both sides of the ball. And on defense especially, they just have more talent that I could probably care to sit here and name. It's going to be a really, really good game. And truly 2 of the best football teams that exist. It feels like a really dumb and obvious way to say that, but just as a football fan, there's so much talent. There's going to be so many good things happening that you should be excited.
Yeah. And it's just like, while Mahomes and Lamar have been here for some time, it still is that feeling of like a new era, right, of football, and getting to see these 2 duke it out at this level is something to be grateful for. Like, it pairs up nicely, and I think this is the way a lot of people Not me. I wasn't that. I didn't think this highly of the Ravens early on in the season. I thought highly of them, not this high, but a lot of people saw it drawn up like this, and I think this emerges two of the best teams of the AFC, and I think it's going to be a dogfight out there. I want to know who you're taking.
I'm going to take the Ravens. I
am also taking the Ravens.
Yeah.
I want to know on one side of the ball, like from the Chiefs and from the Ravens, who you think their game changers need to be for each of the teams to win.
On the Chiefs, I'm going to have to say Isaiah Pacheco. I think if they can control the clock and keep the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hand and sustain drives, I think Isaiah Pacheco is an important part of that, especially whether or not he's healthy. They do believe he's going to play, but how effective is he going to be? And I think keeping the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands is going to be very key. And for the Ravens, I mean, the obvious answer is Lamar. He's the MVP. He's the MVP of the league. If it's not him, I just need one of the pass catchers to step up, like big time. Whether that's Mark Andrews coming back from injury, we don't know if he is yet. Isaiah Likely, who's been on fire recently, or the rookie Zay Flowers, or one of a number of other guys. Is Nelson Aguilar? Yeah, he's still there.
Yeah, he got a touchdown. So he was the first touchdown scorer.
Maybe Nelson Aguilar.
Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, Rashad Bateman. They got so many guys. You just need one to step up, I think, and have a big game. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to go with.
Yep, I agree with you on Lamar Jackson is my choice, and specifically his legs. For me, for the Chiefs, I actually think it is going to be Rashee Rice for me. I think trying to use him a lot early on is going to open up a lot more for someone like Travis Kelce to help you secure the game later on in the game, because you can see patterns develop with Mahomes, and I think the Ravens are going to try and abuse that if they can see that he's relying on Rashee Rice. I think it's going to open up Travis Kelce more because the same way every team does, I expect the Ravens to come in double teamed on Kelce most of the game. So I think relying on Rice to then later on revert back to your guy is going to be crucial for the Chiefs.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, and we have another 3-1 matchup. The number 3 Detroit Lions will be heading across the country to San Francisco, where they'll be seeing the number 1 seed 49ers. That will happen Sunday at 6:30, and San Francisco opens as 7-point favorites against the Lions.
Yeah. So a couple things here. To start, obviously the Deebo Samuel injury is massive. The offense did not look the same after he left the game. Kyle Shanahan came out and said that it affected the way that they were looking at things. It affected the way that they were calling plays. It affected the whole offense, and that's not surprising. He's a do-it-all player for them, and he's very good at what he does. It all. So that's huge. That's a massive question mark going into the game. I don't know when we're going to know. It truly feels like a 50-50 chance right now. I lean on the side of him going, but I'm questioning how effective he'll be if he does. An interesting stat, Lions haven't won a road playoff game since 1957, and they have not won in San Francisco since 1975. It's also the first time since 1991 the Lions are in the NFC Championship game.
There's really not much to talk about the Moon. I would love to give you some more Moon stats, but the Moon seems to not favor or discourage either of these teams. So it's not up to the Moon this time.
Thank God.
Yeah. Some more interesting
stats. Entertain that. I don't.
The Moon?
You.
It's a full moon tonight. Did you know that?
No.
You should know that.
It's foggy here. I can't see my neighbor's house. You should
know the power of a full moon.
Just shut up and keep reading.
The Lions gave up the 6th most passing yards per game in the regular season with 279. Both Stafford and Baker put up 349 or more, so it obviously went over that. The Niners defense has allowed the 3rd fewest points and the 8th fewest yards this season, which is interesting, noting how well and effective this Lions offense has been, to see how well they pair up with that. They gave up 90 catches for 625 yards to running backs, which ranked in the bottom 8th of the NFL of both categories. For CMC, the Lions gave up the 2nd least rushing yards this season. And when the Lions went 4-4 this season, when I love this stat. When Goff threw at least one pick, but 10-1 when he didn't. As for the 49ers, they went 2-4 in games where Purdy threw one pick, but 11-0 when he didn't throw any interceptions.
Yeah.
So turnovers is the name of the game in this one.
And I think that's really big for the Lions defense because they've been particularly
Huge.
effective this postseason in creating big plays on defense, creating big turnovers. CJ had a big one last week after all the nonsense back and forth between him and Baker Mayfield. It was on a pick drill. CJ is just always in the right place at the right time, but he made the play nonetheless. That's 90% of the battle, it feels like, with defensive backs and interceptions. But yeah, I think that stat and the stat about the Niners defense being susceptible to passing yards to the running back are two things that I'm going to be hyper focused on going into this matchup.
It's for me, the Lions secondary, huge part of it for me is where I'm going to focus a lot of my attention. I think they were really creative with their pressure against the Bucks, and I'm really intrigued to see how that works against the Niners. They even had like a couple safety blitzes in there. Brian Branch got a sack, I believe, at one point. It was just so creative, and I think that's going to be really crucial here with trying to throw Brock Purdy off. And I think that has to be your whole game plan because, I mean, the numbers show you that when that happens, it favors you so much. So I think that has to be the Lions' game plan here is just disrupt as much as possible on defense in any facet. And I think pressure is going to be a huge part of that. But their secondary has always been really interesting to me this year. I'm a huge fan of Brian Branch. So I always have the Lions secondary.
What's your pick?
The Lions.
And who are your difference makers? Whatever that question you asked me.
For the Niners, I actually think I'm going to say George Kittle. Just a big guy against this Lions defense. I think that is going to be important. It's all going to come down to Deebo's there because I think that made a huge difference. But I'm still picking George Kittle either way. The Lions for me is probably going to be, for me, it's a tie between like Jahmyr Gibbs and Aiden Hutchinson.
Those were going to be my picks. Yep. Not for the Niners, but for the Lions. Yeah. Yeah. Jahmyr Gibbs, because of exactly what I mentioned. They gave up 90 catches for 625 yards running back, which both were bottom 8 in the NFL this season. Jahmyr Gibbs has been massive for the Lions on this playoff run, both in the postseason and to end the season. He's been on a tear. He's electric, and it's so fun to watch them get the ball into his hands and not give it to David Montgomery 40 times a game. David Montgomery's been fine, but
how far we've come.
Yep, from week one, when it was extremely clear which one was more talented and whatever. Regardless, Jahmyr Gibbs is a game changer, and Aiden Hutchinson is a great answer because I do think that if they want to win this game, they need to make Brock Purdy. They just need to get to him. They need to make him unsettled. And for the Niners, for me, I think it's probably Nick Bosa in a very similar manner. Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave. Javon Hargrave has been awesome this season. He was an offseason signing for the Niners. He's just a really good interior pass rusher. And I think between the two of them, they need to get pressure on Goff. They need to get in his face. And this Lions offensive line is so good. They're so good. And that is the matchup. I think that is the matchup for me that is going to decide this game. I changed my mind about everything I just said. It's going to be Niners defensive line, Lions offensive line. If they can protect Goff, they win. If they can get to Goff, the Niners win.
Who is your pick?
I'm going to pick the Lions because I really just don't want to pick the Niners. However, if I was actually making a bet on it, I would just pick the Lions to cover the 7 points because I do think it'll be closer than that, especially if Deebo doesn't play. So.
Yeah.
Also, I trust Dan Campbell to manage a game significantly more than I trust Kyle Shanahan to manage a game, and that is an underrated part of big playoff games. It is extremely underrated, and I don't want to be terrified and scared when we get the
Scared.
ball.
That's the word. You
Yeah,
don't want to
so
go into the NFC Championship game scared and
if you
playing
play scared,
cowardly.
you blow a 28-3 lead,
Yeah.
or you you lose all the time. Like
Yeah.
he's not a good game managing coach,
Especially when
and
you're
that's gonna
facing a
frustrate
team like the Lions who will take all of the chances you give them. They
me. Yep.
don't care. Like sometimes it feels like they're playing backyard football. Like, screw it, we'll go for it. Who cares? Like when you're playing a team like that, you're going to have to be aggressive. And I don't know that the Niners are up to that task.
Talent can overcome some of the game management problems, but the talent
Mhm.
gap isn't big enough here like it was last week that
Yes.
I can just brush it away. I think it's gonna I think there's going to be, this is my hot take, I think there's going to be at least one moment that we look back as a major turning point, whether it be good or bad, but specifically as a game management like factor into this game, whether it's Dan Campbell making a very analytically forward but risky choice to win them the game, or Kyle Shanahan doing something really stupid and it ends up biting him in the ass. I think one of those two things is going to happen. And yeah, I think that's going to be a storyline leaving the game.